Hey guys, this is the beginning of our second unit, supply and demand, and we're going to talk about demand first. And I just want to do a quick little intro video before you got to lectures. This lecture I recorded a couple years ago, but it's a pretty good talking about the demand curve and the shape of it and when you would shift the demand curve. So this is probably a pretty good lecture to take some notes on. And even if you're not like a math person, this isn't, you're going to see a graph and you might freak out a little bit, but it's not really a lot of math. It's just showing that as the price goes up of something, then less people are going to buy it. And as the price gets lower, then more people are going to buy it. So a lot of you mentioned that on your Unit 1 test too. You talked about like toilet paper and other goods that might be more expensive now because they're in short supply. So you kind of already have an understanding of this probably in your mind about supply and demand, but this is showing you the graphs. So today we're going to look at demand, and then later in the week we're going to talk about supply. So today is on the consumer side, and then we'll talk about supply, which is the producer side, and then we'll put them together. And when you're looking at this, what you're eventually going to be asked to do is like look at like newspaper headlines and say what happened to the demand. Did it increase or did it decrease? Why did it do that? So there's different shifters of demand that you'll see in the lecture, and you'll want to know those and why the demand curve shifts. And if it's just the price of the product at this time, it's just a movement on the curve. So that's just a little precursor to the lecture you're going to watch here. You see the learning targets here. You do not need to write all those down. So just kind of, I'll talk through them and then on the video, and then you'll get to the more of the other information. But you are going to want to refer back to your notes with this lecture. It's going to help you for tomorrow's activity too. All right. Thanks. Bye.
Hey guys, welcome to another lecture. Here's the learning targets for today. I can define and illustrate demand through schedules and graphs. I can distinguish between changes in demand and changes in quantity demanded. That's going to end up being important, so I will harp on that quite a bit throughout the lecture. Explain the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Identify and explain the variables which cause a change in demand. And illustrate and explain the changes in quantity demanded given a change in price. So that's what we're going to look at tonight. The quantity demanded, and I'll just refer to that as QD, is the amount of a good that buyers are willing and able to purchase. So they have to have that money available and also want to buy that product. So both those things would have to happen. The law of demand states that other things equal, and we use a Latin term called ceteris paribus, that the quantity demanded of a good falls when the price of the good rises. So obviously we see that all the time. If you go to a store and you see the price going up of a certain good, you might not buy that anymore. That's the law of demand. Also, when you go to a store, you might see something on sale that the price went down. Well, then the quantity demand will go up for that good. So that is an inverse relationship. I hope you're enjoying the dancing arrows. I'll give you 2 more seconds to watch them. Okay, and we're done. The demand schedule, it looks like this. This is what the consumers might want. This is an individual demand schedule. And so for 0 cents, this person's wanting to buy 12 ice cream cones at 50 cents 10, at $1.08, $1.56, $2 4, at $2.52, and at $3, this person would want to buy any of the colorful ice cream cones that are in the pictures here. And so that's what a demand schedule looks like. We can graph that demand schedule and create a demand curve. This is an important curve to know. So it's kind of the beginning of what demand and supply and equilibrium look like. So this is your first glimpse into that. So this is demand, and you can see at $3, 0 ice cream cones are demanded, and at $2.50, 2 are demanded, and so on. I'm going to go back to that real quick. As you can see, a decrease in price. It goes from $2 to $1.50. It will increase in quantity by 2 cones. So the price goes down, quantity demand goes up, and that's just a movement on the curve. Here's what would happen if you had an increase in price. So if you had an increase in price for $1 to $2, you would have movement on the curve from A to B, showing that there was 8 ice cream cones demanded at one point, and now there's only 4. And so that's a change in quantity demanded. And again, I told you that was important here at the beginning of the lecture, the difference between a change in demand and a change in quantity demanded. And a change in quantity demanded is only the result in the change of price of that product at that time. So I don't know if you can write that down or not, but it's price of the product at that time. And we'll talk about what happens if it's the price in the future. We'll talk about if it's price of other products, but if it's the price of a product, that's on the vertical axis there. And so that's a movement on the curve, and that's called quantity demanded. And you're going to get annoyed with me at how many times I remind you of that. But it's just really important to understand that subtle difference between quantity demanded and demand. And in fact, I guess I made it so that it showed up again. And again, there you go. It's price. Remember that. And so we have shifts in demand curves. So that would be something other than price, which is on the vertical axis. So if it's something other than price, it must shift the curve because it's not measured on the vertical axis. So the first one we have there is taste. So let's just kind of keep this with ice cream, I guess. So taste would be like if there's advertisements for ice cream, celebrities endorse it, Katy Perry endorses it. If that were to happen, then there might be an increase in demand. And if there's an increase in demand, that is a shift to the right. If you have more money or less money, that may increase or decrease your demand for ice cream. And we're going to get more particular on that in another slide. But again, if you might lose your job or something, maybe there'd be a decrease in demand. It doesn't have anything to do with the price of ice cream. It has to do with something that happened to you and to your income. So that's I for income. Related goods. Many of you might go to Cherry Berry once in a while, and so Cherry Berry is frozen yogurt. So if that goes on sale, then there might be less people that would buy ice cream, and so that's a related good. So if the price of Cherry Berry goes down, then the demand for ice cream might go down because they would be buying Cherry Berry instead. So it doesn't have to do with the price of ice cream, it has to do with the price of the substitute. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide. Expectations. If you know it's going to be cold, then you're probably not going to buy ice cream. So if it's warm today and it's going to be colder next week, I might buy my ice cream right now. So don't look too close at that picture there. There's a naughty word on there. Sorry about that. I did exit off. That's Minnesota for you, huh? And then size. So if you move from one consumer to many consumers, that would also change your demand for your product. So it's no longer called quantity demanded because that has to do with price. It's called a change in demand. And if it's a change in demand, it is one of these 5 shifters here. So, and we can remember that by saying tires, and I'll quiz you over and over, hoping that you can remember. And I told you that we would talk a little bit more about income. So income, there are normal goods and inferior goods out there. Think about, right now, maybe you worked this summer. What might you have bought? Some people might save up for a car, so that'd be a normal good. As my income goes up, I buy more of it. Now, if I buy a car, I don't need a bus anymore to ride public transportation, so that would be an inferior good. So as my income goes up, I buy more of a normal good and less of an inferior good. The opposite is also true. If I happen to lose that job that I got this summer, then all of a sudden my demand for a normal good would go down, but I might have to buy the inferior good now. Some other examples of a normal and inferior good, because normal goods are more like your luxury items, inferior goods might be more of your cheaper items. So a normal good might be a restaurant meal compared to an inferior meal good that might be like McDonald's. Or a normal good might be like steak, an inferior good might be a hamburger, or worse yet, ramen noodles, which hopefully you don't need to have too much of in college. That's like 100% salt. That is some crazy stuff there. But I guess we all go through it sometime. So that's income. I also said we'd talk a little bit more about substitutes, related goods. And related goods could be substitutes. And so when a fall in the price of one good reduces the demand for another. So like Starbucks and Caribou. If Starbucks has a huge sale, then maybe more people will go to Starbucks and then there'll be less demand for Caribou because they're substitutes, and vice versa. And complements are when 2 goods go together. So like the iPhone and an iPhone case, which I need a new one right now. but they go together. So when you buy an iPhone or you buy anytime you buy a phone, you might buy a case. Unless some of you guys are brave, some of you are and walk around with nothing. But most of the time, you have to buy them both together. Or you can think of like a hot dog and a hot dog bun. You can think about a car and gas, computers and software. Those are all complements. So if iPhones are a lot cheaper, then it doesn't matter what happens to the price in cases. You're probably going to have to buy a case. So the price of cases could remain constant, and you would just end up buying. There'd be a bigger demand for them because the iPhone's cheaper. So uh, that's what complements do because you buy them together. And again, substitutes are when you only need one of them, and so if the price is cheaper for one of them, you'll buy that and not the other. So substitutes and complements are two terms to also know. So in review, again, I said I would harp on the quantity demanded and demand, but price of the product at that time is simply a movement on the demand curve, and we call that quantity demanded. And you can see that on this lovely drawing here. That's just a movement on the curve from P1 to P2. There is no shift because it's a change in price at that time. Now, what happens if there's anything else, any of those other shifters, tires, if you can remember that, taste, income, related goods, expectations, size, is anything else that will shift the entire curve either to the left or to the right. So a decrease in demand would be to the left, and an increase in demand would be to the right. And that's called a change in demand. All right, got that? All right, have a good one. We'll see you tomorrow.